Hello everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Where are you dialing from? This is CK Vishwakarma, founder of All Things Connected. It's my great pleasure and honor to be partnering with Verimatrix to bring you the Apex Security Summit 2020. And security, when we talk about the digital world, whether it's about personal devices, consumer devices, or industrial applications, is one big topic when I talk to my customers as well as partners. Today's session is primarily focusing around the banking and fintech. And with me joining today is Neal Michie from Verimatrix and Varun also from the Verimatrix. Then we have three wonderful partners and speaker, Shubha Halda from Appnox, Julie Ree from Atron, and Nilesh from ACC. And I'm going to hand it over this virtual stage to my friend and my partner in this summit, Varun, to come on the virtual stage. Over to you, Varun.
Thank you, CK. So before I get started, I would like to extend a very deep and heartfelt thank you to CK for helping put this event together. He's a real gentleman, an incredible partner, and believes strongly in the value of the ecosystem, bringing people together to make business happen for everyone. CK, thanks very much. Thanks again. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Verimatrix and all our partners, thanks very much for making the time to attend the Verimatrix Asia Pacific Security Summit today. My name is Varun. I look after business development in Asia Pacific, and I will be your MC and moderator for the panel today. As many of you know, Verimatrix is a 20-year-old security-centric company, trusted by over 1,000 enterprise customers all around the world, including some of the biggest names in banking and finance, such as MasterCard. We protect over 500 million devices and are present all across Asia Pacific, including local presence in Australia, China, India, Singapore, and Vietnam, and also present in other countries through our partners. Earlier this year, we won the Gold Stevie Award for customer support with a 99% customer satisfaction rating. We are super happy to have you join us this afternoon and to give us and our partners the opportunity to share some of our learnings over the years with you. I want to very quickly introduce Subho. And Subho is going to talk about vulnerability testing of the app, what it is, why it is important. Subho Halder is the CISO and co-founder of Appnox. He started his career researching mobile security, and currently he helps businesses to detect and fix security vulnerabilities. He has also detected critical loopholes in companies that you're all familiar with. We're talking about Google, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft. We're privileged to have a real rock star with us today. Subho, thanks very much for joining, and over to you.
Sure, Varun, thank you so much for the introduction. Well, I'm not a rock star though, but I'm more of a security researcher. That's what I like to call myself as. So I'm, as Varun said, that I'm going to talk more about the security aspect, the mobile application security aspect of the talk. And so I'm basically the co-founder of Appnox. Appnox is into mobile application security testing, and I'm going to talk more about that later on. So first, and the most important thing is why security is so important for mobile applications, right? So I've listed down 4 most important problems. The first is fragmented application, and the second is fragmented platforms, and I'm going to explain you why. So for in terms of fragmented platforms, we have different kind of platforms. We have Android, we have iOS. In Android, we have other platforms such as Android tablets, or in case of iOS, we have iPad OS, we have Watch OS. For Android, we have Wear OS, Android Wear OS, Android One. So there are multiple kinds of platforms, even platforms coming in different flavors, in different variations. So for example, if you're not using a Google Nexus phone, you might be using some other phone, like for example, Huawei has their own kind of implementation. Samsung has their own kind of implementation for Android. So there are n number of different fragmented platforms. And with these kind of fragmented platforms, you need to create fragmented applications also. So if you want to support devices specific to certain flavors or certain hardware specifics, you need to make separate applications for those. And this becomes a huge problem for developers to maintain security across, right? So the first 2 point is pretty simple and we get to understand, but the third point, which I'm going to talk about, is the personal and the social information, which is very, very important. uh, your device will always have your personal and social information. You have your banking applications, you have your communication application, and it's installed, it's logged in, and it is always there logged in with notification coming in. So imagine the amount of personal data your mobile app has. I have a very simple example. If I want to log into Facebook to watch my status, provided I forgot my devices, and if I go up and ask you, can you share your mobile device so that I can log into my Facebook, that is never going to happen. This kind of conversation never happens. But if you're carrying a laptop, that's fine, right? So why is that mentality? It's simply because your phone holds all kind of personal and social information. And the fourth point is the most important point, which is the business and the enterprise datas are also found in these kind of devices, right? In your mobile devices. And for these devices to get stolen or to get lost is very, very easy. And it's also very easy to perform attacks and data thefts on your mobile apps or on your mobile endpoint. So these are the major 4 pointers why mobile security is much, much more important than even a desktop or even a server-side security, which is also important. I'm not even denying the fact it is not important, but mobile app security is much, much more important than any other app, than any other security which is out there. And I've been working on that. So this is a question which I want to ask: why mobile security is important? And to answer this question, I can give you a very simple example, right? For example, I'm going to take an example of PayPal. So PayPal had an app which came out, and in the App Store, the PayPal was the first app to introduce Touch ID based authentication, which means now you do not need to put in a password, you do not need to type in a password. You can just use your fingerprint or your biometric fingerprint, and it will log you in. But the problem was the implementation of that was not done properly, which means anybody can bypass that issue. Anyone can bypass that biometric authentication which is there. The problem is, once the app is out there in the App Store, you have no control over the application. It's gone. It's out in the public. So even if PayPal immediately tried fixing it, and within the next 7 days they have a fix already out there in the App Store, you can still download that app in your device, the older version of the app. You can go to APK or you can go to any other third-party websites and download the older version of the application, and that vulnerability still exists. The problem with mobile applications are, once it is out there in the market, or once it is out there in the app markets, or once it is out there after production, you have no control over the app. It's gone out, right? And that is the biggest issue for mobile security. In terms of server-side or web security, even if there is a security issue which comes out, it's pretty easy for you to go ahead and fix it, and that fix is going to be reflected all across, right? It is going to be reflected everywhere, and you do not have to care about older version of your website. Even if it is cached in archive.org or in any other places, that's still fine. But in case of a mobile app, that's not happening, right? Dropbox came up with their first application which had an issue by which one can use their API in an unauthenticated way and get, it's a system API, the app API, and get any kind of sensitive files which is there stored inside Dropbox. So Dropbox obviously fixed it. But did you know you can download the first version of Dropbox from APK Pure, the very first version of Dropbox which came out, which is still there in the internet, and it can still carry out the same kind of an attack, even if the Dropbox have fixed it, in the next upcoming versions. So now the problem, we are aware of the problem, right? Now to fix this problem, there are multiple ways, right? One of the major thing which you have to understand is, before you push the app outside, you need to perform a certain set of security assessment. And these are some of the assessment which you should be doing. These are some of the penetration testing phases which should be done in the application. And I have divided into specific parts. The first part is static analysis, which is basically code analysis or configuration level check. The coverage of this part is almost 30%. It's not more than 30% because it kind of gives you only the idea or the logic of the application and how the application is configured, and that is it, right? Followed by something called a dynamic analysis. A dynamic analysis is basically running the application in a device and figuring out how the app is behaving, whether it's storing data in an unencrypted format, or is there any security loopholes, or if any sensitive information is getting leaked. So dynamic analysis constitutes 40% of the overall coverage of your mobile security, practice, followed by network analysis. Now, most 98% of the application which is there in the App Store communicates over network with their major business logic written on the server side. And I'm sure there is a panel discussion which is going to happen later on, and there is a talk about cloud security after this, which will talk about more of the server side component of it. But obviously, before even you push out in the production, you should also perform a network analysis, which kind of covers 15% of your coverage in terms of mobile application security. And obviously, the last set is the manual assessment, which covers all kind of business logical issues, any kind of issues which may not fall in under static, dynamic, or network, which might be a combination of all. So I'm hoping that these are the I'm hoping it's kind of clear for you that these are certain of the steps which you need to follow. And AppNox, at AppNox, we have already automated the first, second, and the third part of the step, which is the static analysis, the dynamic analysis, and the network analysis. And the manual assessment is also something which we perform at AppNox. So I'm going to talk about cyber resilience, and this is something which Ashutosh Jain, CISO at Axis Bank, told me. So we were discussing, one fine day last year, and he told me that there are different kinds of companies or organizations which is out there in the world, right? One such kind is like a snail. If you can see my mouse moving, snail. So companies who falls into this category, snail, they cannot even detect breaches, right? So they think that they are secure, but they do not actually perform assessment. So even if there is a data breach happening, they won't be able to detect it. There are other categories of companies like Turtle, right? So there would be companies who can detect breaches because they perform assessment, they does all of these security practices which you should be following, but they do not remediate it fast enough. So again, that doesn't matter, right? So even if I tell you that these are the security issues which you need to patch it, but if you do not remediate fast enough, then again, there is a problem, right? So I think Dolphin is the one which everyone should at least be at. So Dolphin are the organization which does a swift detection and also does a swift remediation and take a remediation action therefor, right? So Dolphin is one thing which we should be at a phase. And the flying fish, I hope I couldn't find a better image for a flying fish, but flying fish is what all the organizations should aim for, which is to predict cyber threats even before it can happen to you, right? So once you can do that, and once you can predict cyber threats, and once you are prepared even before the apps are pushed outside, and you can figure out what are the issues and make sure that those are closed, and hence you can create the future in your organization in terms of security practices. So in short, I just wanted to tell and give you a food for thought that try to aim for a flying fish where you can at least predict your cyber threats and create a future, secure future for your company and for your organization.
Thanks very much, Subho. So let's turn to Julie. So Julie's from our partner, Aton, over in Korea, the land of BTS. And for those who are not familiar with BTS, it's the most happening boy band in the world these days. Yeah, Julie, so she's smiling, she knows me. Anyway, so let's understand from her how banks in Korea are applying security. With a background that includes stints at Visa and the Olympic Winter Games Organizing Committee, Julie focuses on B2B marketing and public relations, while also overlooking global partnerships for Aton. Julie, over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction, Varun. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julie from Aton, as Varun said. Today, I'm going to talk about how the company has changed the mobile banking process, the whole process here in Korea, while maintaining the security level. So, before I start, this is a brief overview of our company. Aton has a very long history of working with banks and financial institutions. We give them innovative solutions to allow customers to easily use the bank services online while securing their information. So we have over 100 million users using our products with over 300 clients here in Korea. So moving on to the next slide, the biggest concern to the banks were how are they going to authenticate the users online? They wanted to have a secure way to identify the users as they are dealing with sensitive information, and also provide a convenient way to use their services. But before I move on how we solve that problem, the Korea market had a somewhat unique authentication environment. The government mandated all online transactions to be verified with the digitalized certificate, which was called a public key certificate. This was first introduced in 1999, so 21 years ago, and has been used publicly until very recently. But the main downside of this technology was that it was very cumbersome for both clients and the customers. And in fact, it also had very low security level. As you can see on this slide, the usual mobile transfer process works like this. So when the user wants to sign into the banking app, they had to get the public key certificate under the condition that they had this certificate issued from the bank branches in person, and then they have to go through another layer of authentication using a OTP token, security card, or ARS. And when this is completed, again, the user had to perform electronic signature with the public key certificate again. And in fact, the public key certificate was, the public key certificate password needed to be 13 or more digit password. So this whole wire transfer process took almost 2 minutes to complete usually. But the government started to change as the new technology arose everywhere. So they've eased the mandatory use of the public key certificate by leaving the matter to the bank's discretions. And then this is how we suggested our security solutions to the banks by using a software type secure element based on the white box crypto technology, which is called the MSafe box, by the way. And with MSafe box, the banks are able to create a high security environment embedded into their smartphones. And with that, users no longer have to use a separate device for their authentication. There are many other secure element technologies in the market. However, MSafe box, as you can see on the chart, utilizes both hardware and software features that allow services to be more compact and while having a good level of security. Having said that, we were able to satisfy our bank clients and enhance customer experience at the same time. And banks are now trending to move towards a more user-friendly solution using their white box crypto technology. So in the past, they used to use a hardware type USIM or trust zone, or they used a lower level of security key store keychain, which was based on the operation system itself. So, but now they're trending towards a software type security element. We'll show you the results. This is how we changed the whole banking process. So do you remember the long list of authentication methods Koreans had to use that I introduced in the first part of this presentation? Well, now it only takes a simple PIN number or biometric to identify the users. As mentioned before, the usual process took almost 2 minutes per transactions, but with several upgrades, we were able to reduce the time up to 20 seconds. And this is how it works. When the user signs in, user authentication is performed with our security solution. So signs in, and after they confirm the transfer, again, our solution is activated, and it's simply completed in seconds. It works the same for the OTP process as well, all done very seamlessly. So with this, we were able to provide our products to the most renowned banks in Korea. And out of 10 apps in the finance category, 8 apps have implemented our solution. Well, this was a brief overview of how we innovated the whole mobile banking process in Korea. Thank you for listening.
Let's now look at some cloud security concerns with Applied Cloud Computing founder and CEO, Nilesh Satpathy. So Nilesh was one of India's earliest cloud practitioners. He's lived and worked in the US, the UK, and India for marquee companies like IBM and Wipro prior to founding ACC. Nilesh is an alum of VGTI and JBIMS, and quite importantly, a guest faculty at IIT Bombay, which happens to be one of the world's top engineering schools. Nilesh, over to you, please.
Okay, so in next 10 minutes, I'll be talking about building applications for scale and how can we secure a cloud landscape. So you must be other speakers talking about how application at the client side, and then what are the tools which protect the application. But there are certain parameters which needs to be considered when it comes to the infrastructure. Before I get into that part, I'll talk about what exactly we do at Applied Cloud Computing. We are one of the most reliable partner for BFSI and media customer when it comes to their cloud computing journey and building cloud native applications. So last year we were also awarded by Amazon as the best consulting partner for the BFSI industry. In last 5 years, we have done more than 100 plus implementations, which includes cloud migration as well as building applications for cloud. We have a couple of interesting products which are into the space of cloud lifecycle management, HR digital onboarding, API management and development platform. And we also have a very good product which is into managing services when it comes to providing cloud support. At our organization, the verticals are security, product engineering, analytics, cloud, and digitalization. We mainly focus on the open source stack when it comes to build application. And recently, we also acquired AWS Financial Services Competency, and we are also a holder of AWS Mobile Competency. Okay, so now I'll just start with how an application can be built to scale when it comes to a concurrency of say 1 million to 5 million or maybe beyond that. Okay, so let's go with this traditional application tier approach where we start with the DNS, when somebody actually try to access your API or application, you have to go through the DNS route. And if your DNS layer doesn't scale, then no matter how strong security or scalable infrastructure you have, you will be in trouble. Public cloud providers like AWS, Azure, they offer a scalable DNS platform. In AWS, we have Route 53, which basically a scalable DNS platform. Once you have a scalable DNS layer, your content needs to be served through edge location, which are basically cache devices hosted at the edge location. The CDN layer will help you serve both static and dynamic content. I'll talk about the web app and database layer. So at web layer, we have multiple options. We can run the software on a virtual machine. When you're building an application in React, you can actually have your front end built in React, and the React app can be actually hosted on a storage. It's not a virtual machine. You can actually host it on a storage device, which can be linked to a content distribution network, and the entire app can be served. You can use Kubernetes if you have built your application front end on container. That container can be run on a Kubernetes platform, or there are specialized container platform like Amazon Elastic Container Service on which you can run. And when you are having a scalable, it is important to have a storage which is shared across component, and shared block storage like Waka, ClusterFS, and even Amazon Elastic File System can play an important role. Now, once the web layer is sorted, all your API calls can be hosted in a similar fashion. So Varun's team was showing a particular app source code can be hacked, and once the source code is hacked, how are you going to damage the central system? So you just find out which are the APIs which are getting called, and then just find out a mechanism to produce the authentication keys, and then you can access the app layer. But however, if there are proper security measures taken care at the app layer, even if the app front end is hacked, you can still protect your database. And then of course the database layer. So at database layer, you can have a master database and multiple read replicas, which will allow you to distribute the load across the databases. Then for better log management, instead of having the log groups defined at the database server, you can have separate units for that. And once you define scalability for each of this layer in cloud native components, then it won't be a challenge to scale. There are certain precautions which you have to take, like do not share session data on a local device, or do not have a caching mechanism on a local device. Have a separate unit for that. Now this was all about the application scalability part. So while we were developing this scalable application about security, I would like to share. So in traditional environment, you start with defining your threat perimeters. But in cloud, where everything is connected, it is very difficult to define those boundaries. Now in cloud, every layer of infrastructure is accessed over API call. So no matter how strong firewall I have built or acquired, if my underlying infrastructure is accessible over a web service, then if somebody catch hold of the web services, I really don't have to worry about which firewall is protecting me in the infrastructure. Then you're aware there are major malware attacks which are happening, attacks like APT threats. They were always around, and we also know that there's less we can do about this threat. But all we can do is always stay on top of the security and follow the best practices. Okay, then security, it starts with design. Understand what are the infrastructure components you have taken, and for each component, the cloud provider has provided a certain security guidelines which we need to follow. Once you're on cloud, you need the automation in place. You cannot rely on firewalls like Checkpoint or Palo. For every kind of a well-defined threat, we should have automation in place, and it should be reactive as well as predictive. And then the most important part is about the user and access. You have secured your entire infrastructure, but then your Azure and AWS console is open. So anybody can enter into your system. of course, we should keep on adapting to the changing landscape. This is the overall cloud security landscape. What needs to be taken care when it comes to the task, what needs to be taken care, and when it comes to the SOC, what we should be focused on. So typically, when you're defining security, focus on what your application is all about, what is your infrastructure, and what kind of modules you have utilized. When it comes to compliance, industry you are building the application. So suppose you are payment industry, compliance will come to get you certified for the payment industry. And security is overall infrastructure and the app layer. Risk basically controls you are identified both for both compliance and security covers all. And then when it comes to governance, you are going to perform and what is going to be. Now, this is the overall AWS security landscape and how for each critical component, they have created a few stack, which are services itself. So when it comes to authorization layer, it's important to define those roles, access, and permission. For that, they have created a service called IAM. And if your organization has a structure and each business unit is required to have a cloud platform, then AWS support this kind of a hierarchy by providing the organization landscape. For authentication, they have services like Cognito, SSO. So the thought behind this is, for each layer of your infrastructure, the cloud provider will provide you a set of tools, okay? And based on your compliance, risk, and government requirement, you can evaluate that, okay? So you had seen in the earlier diagram how security, compliance, and governance, okay? So AWS will take care of the security part, but at the same time, the public cloud provider will tell you that security model. So what does that mean? We have given you, which has certain compliance toward PCI DSS norms, but however, you will have to define your governance and risk structure. Okay, and then how we will define that governance? People, process, and tools. That's the way. That's the traditional way of doing things. I'll start with tools. A lot of open source components are available now, which takes care of the security assessment, offensive security, security at the node level, and at the same time, it gives you provision to monitor all the logs. So some of the organization, their intention is to get certified. You're compliant when you're doing it all the time. And for any audit, it is imperative to have logs which are stored for the last 6 years. Okay, and once you have all these things in place, I think you will be definitely on top of your cloud security. And like I had mentioned before, it is always a shared. So start with all the security best practices and then start engaging with companies like Aton or Verimatrix, and then start engaging with experts like Shubho, who will then help you evaluate the kind of security you already have and will help you bulletproof further.
Thank you very much for it. Something that was actually genuinely interesting and kind of different from what the rest of us have been talking about. So let me start the questions with Subho. Okay. So Subho, when you look at things like VAPT, is there any specific vertical where you think that VAPT is needed more than the other verticals?
So basically verticals where it deals with your personal data, specifically the banking sector, the BFSI sector, the retail, e-commerce, and sectors where logical, business logical issues are very much important, not only for a revenue loss for the company, but also for the data loss for the consumer. It's pretty important. But I would say the top 3 sectors would be the banking sectors, the aviation sector, and the retail sector, the FMCG and the retail, and the overall e-commerce sector. These are the top 3, I would say. But I'm not going to exclude gaming sector also, because in the gaming sector, the dynamics is a little bit different. the loss of revenue only happens for the company, but not for the consumers. But for all the other, for the first three sectors which I talked about, it's for the both. So yeah, I hope the answer.
It
I
does
hope
indeed.
I answered
It does. It does. Thanks, Subho. Julie, I want to come to you for a quick.
I hope I answered your question. Can you hear
Subho,
me?
yes, thank you. So Julie, are you did mention when we were talking earlier that you're looking at expanding your services outside of Korea as well. So given that you're looking at entering into Southeast Asia, are there one or two key differentiators about your company that you think you might want folks to know about?
Thanks for the question. In fact, well, let's see. So what I introduced today is unique to the Korea market, but for the other markets, I'm pretty sure the banking process isn't that complicated as it was in Korea. But although I'm sure that the banks already have their kind of secure matters in place, but what we can provide is that with the white box crypto technology here in Korea, users can make a bank transfer. The daily limit to the bank transfer is up to 500,000 US dollars per day, so which is very high. So that proves that our technology is that much secure. Banks can decide the limit in proportion to the security level. So they've given us the highest daily limit, which again proves that our technology is very secure.
Cool. So what I'm hearing is that one of your key differentiators would be the comfort and security of having dealt with very high transaction levels.
That's right.
Okay. That's very good. Okay, thank you for that. Nilesh, we have you on a good signal for a short while, it seems. Let me quickly get a question in before we lose you again. So I was kind of wondering, Nilesh, back in the day, it used to be that banks were quite tentative and hesitant about embracing the cloud. Is that still a legitimate concern? Are banks now adopting it? What ways are you seeing any changes in the BFSI sector and cloud adoption?
Okay, so a couple of years back, bank did not have a policy in place, but they started experimenting with cloud with their UAT environments. One of the leading banks in India now has a cloud policy in place, and in fact, the PCI DSS compliance also has now provision for evaluating cloud components. A couple of years back, none of the banks wanted to use infrastructure which is completely managed by cloud providers. For example, the load balancer, the CDN, where you do not have access to the root level. So there were little apprehensions about using those components. But if in AWS or Azure, if you're not using a load balancer, you will not get the scalability. But now the recent policies which banks have made, now you're allowed to use the managed components. Now, when it came to security, there were still few ambiguities where what kind of HSM device you should be using. The cloud provider will give you a HSM solution, but they will not tell you what is the design make or the hardware. And when, not just in India, but any country in APAC, each country has certain hardwares which are certified. And that is one of the hindrance getting core banking systems into the cloud. So everything is sorted, but when it comes to the encryption keys, the hardware box which is managing that, it still has to reside on the ground. And then it becomes a kind of a hybrid scenario and it introduces latency. So to answer your questions, now the policy is in place. Even the PCI DSS and the other security compliance, they actually address and weight cloud specific native products. So yeah.
It's good to know. So what I guess, yeah, well, you were, yeah, thanks. I think what I'm hearing is that there are now processes and certifications, etc., in place that enable banks to freely consider moving to the cloud. Is that correct? Okay. Neal, finally, the audience gets to see you. Thanks very much for that video. That was like super. I really enjoyed it. I hope the audience did too. There are two questions for you. One is a question I had, and one is a question from Deepti from HDFC Credits that I'm picking up out of the Q&A box to the right. So the first question is, I sometimes come across CISOs who say, look, my app is very lightweight. It just uses some APIs, and all the heavy lifting is in the backend. And my backend is secure, so I don't need to protect the app. So what is your reaction to that? I suspect I know the answer, but I would love to hear it anyway. And let me also point you to the second question immediately after that, which would be from Deepti about, is ProGuard enough? And I suspect I know the answer to that too, but let me...
Yes, I think two questions that I also hear very frequently and very often when talking to people. So if we look at the first question about it's all in the back end, the mobile app has no valuable data, no valuable processing in it. I think the simple answer is, if the mobile app has no valuable data or no valuable processing in it, actually what value does it offer to your customers? If there's value in the app to your customers, then by extension, there has to be valuable data, valuable processing that's going on for the bad guys, for the attackers that may be interested in your application. I would, I suppose, challenge anyone that says there's nothing interesting going on in my mobile app to do a simple data flow analysis, understand what data is going in, what data is coming out of the application. You will almost certainly very quickly find that there's personal data, there's account data. If we're kind of focusing on the financial space, there's financial transaction data type things happening in the application. That means it's valuable to the bad guys. You can't just rely on the back end to protect you. And the reason you can't rely on the back end to protect you is because as soon as there's valuable data, valuable stuff happening in the mobile application, then that mobile application, by extension, becomes part of your ecosystem. Your ecosystem is no longer kind of a nice server locked away in a data center with firewalls and guard dogs walking around it. It is now kind of extended out. That ecosystem stretches out to all those millions of clients you have out there. And you need your security practices, your security processes to extend out to that ecosystem, extended ecosystem as well. And on the second question about ProGuard, I think kind of if we go back to the video that we were showing earlier and showing how you open up an application, that symbol obfuscation that I spoke about on the application was ProGuard. The application was protected with ProGuard. So yes, it provides some anonymization of what the code, what the methods are doing, but it is a very light anonymization, which is what symbol obfuscation gives you. If you look at the documentation for ProGuard, you listen to the developers of ProGuard, they actually describe it as an optimizer. They don't describe it as protection. So it's shrinking down information, but it's not adding real protection to the code that you need to stop the analysis, the reverse engineering.
Thanks for that, Neil. There's another question, and this one I want to direct at you and then at Shubho as well. Can you start? And this one is by Sharuhizar from Telkom Malaysia. And he asks, well, I guess what he's asking is, can iOS apps also be hacked? A, can they be hacked? B, can they be hacked as easily as the Android ones? And Neil, could you start? And then perhaps Shubho can also give some insight into VAPT on.
Yep, certainly. So the very, very short answer is yes, they can be hacked. The sort of analysis we showed today could be extended, and we could do a similar video for iOS. I think the one caveat and the one reason that people see iOS as being more secure than Android, which is, I suppose, a slightly false impression, but the reason you get that impression is that Apple keep a walled garden in their ecosystem. So it's not quite as open as the Android ecosystem. So to do the sort of analysis I showed, typically you would first jailbreak the phone that you're doing the attack on, you're extracting the application from. But from there, it would be pretty much the same process that we showed today. And jailbreaking is not a hard, difficult thing to do on pretty much any iOS device. A quick Google will tell you that.
Right. I'm just going to take this also, and I strongly believe what Neal said. If you would have asked me this question 3 years ago, I would have said yes. Might take a little bit, tooling to do that. It's not going to be as easy as Android, where you can just go and see the source code. But if you talk about now, we have huge amount of tools, open source, free. I can name few tools. Frida is there. The PayPal. Okay, so the PayPal example which I was giving you, where Touch ID bypass was there, right? That was a iOS app, right? And it's pretty easy to do that. Nowadays, you do not even need a jailbreak to do the VAPT of a iOS app. We do MDM assessment. So we do assessment of applications which is there in MDM stores, right? An MDM application, as you know, cannot be installed in jailbroken devices. It's pretty simple to hack iOS as well as Android applications, and we do it in an automated fashion. So that also shows you how easy it is. And just to give you a small fact, the number of vulnerable application in iOS is almost equal to the number of vulnerable application in Android in the App Store and Android Store. But you will always have this mentality that App Store will have less, malicious application, which means iOS App Store won't have application which is going to hack your data, but applications which have weak security controls are obviously there, right? So malware-based applications in the app stores are way too less. It's like less than 1%, and which might go 2% probably. But the amount of application which can be hacked in an iOS and Android app store are almost the same, and which is the percentage is around 70%. So yeah.
That's news to me, actually, that it's become that easy. I actually always also had that perception that iOS is a lot harder. I guess some of us Apple guys like to think that we're safer, but thanks for pointing that out. And now I'm going to be a little bit more worried. Speaking of which, CK just ran a poll with the audience. We couldn't see it, but the poll was with the audience, and he asked the audience, "Do you think the banking mobile app you use is secure?" Interestingly enough, 61% said yes, but 39% said no. That's a shockingly high number, guys. So if, for the banks here, you want to increase that security perception, you should be talking to Shubho, you should be talking to Verimatrix, you should be talking to Aton and getting white box security in there. And of course, with Nilesh and getting a complete secure cloud backend. So I just want to see if there are any other questions. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wonder how the perception changed across the last hour. I wonder if we've done that poll at the start and then at the end.
Yeah, so let's see. Let's just quickly look through some of the other questions as well. I see a question from someone I know who asked whether if you can see the source code of a mobile app, can you also see the backend SQL queries, stored procedures, and would that allow someone to use the mobile app and understand how the backend system is architected? Maybe Neal, maybe you can take that, and then also actually Nilesh, I would like you to see if there is some thought you can add in terms of database protection at the backend, specifically when it comes to the cloud. Neal, starting with you, please.
I'm going to start my answer with the cop-out phrase of "it depends," but it depends on how the application, whether it's a mobile banking app or any other application, is talking to its backend system. Apps use what's called APIs, internet doorways, to talk to backend systems. And with those APIs, they exchange data, they make requests on the backend, they get information back from the backend. So all the functionality is powered by these APIs. depending on how those APIs are implemented, depends on what you can see, what you can understand of the backend system. So some APIs do send SQL queries, so database commands across the APIs. So in which case you can find those SQL queries in the mobile application, you can manipulate them, you can abuse them, you can do what's called an SQL injection attack using the mobile application. But even when it's not using raw database commands, it's a kind of maybe a more refined or more kind of locked down API, still using the mobile app as a way of attacking the backend is very common. People reverse engineer the application, they learn how it's talking to the backend systems, and then they use that learning to be able to automate attacks, to find attacks onto the backend systems. So they know what the APIs are. Once you know what they are, you can then use that to abuse the backend, which is a very common and very scary attack vector. And I'll pass that.
Nilesh, anything specific you think can be done from the AWS side or the cloud side to help protect? Can anyone hear Nilesh? Yeah, okay. Nilesh, there seems to be some problem with your system. We'll come back to you a little bit later. Julie, let me address that question to you. So there was another piece, not specifically from the database side, but it basically said whether, let me see if I can find that again. It was from Deepti. Yes, about the communication link. So when you secure, you use the white box encryption technology to create a virtual TEE in the application. Can you similarly use that to also secure the communication link so that whatever's going back and forth is also locked up?
I'm going to have to apologize first because I'm not a technical, I don't have a technical specialty. So with those questions, I'm going to take a memo and then get back to you after the session.
Sounds good. Thank you. Nilesh, you want to take another shot at it? Maybe turn off your video so that if you have a bandwidth issue, you can at least get the audio going.
Okay. So there are a couple of best practices. Host your database in a applications which are accessing the database will only be allowed through the security group. The second thing which you can do is set up your database in a multi-AZ environment. So even if one endpoint is compromised, you will have another copy. We also, the cloud providers also provide you with the WAF offering. That WAF can help you protect from SQL injection attacks. And these are the few best practices which all cloud providers offers you. Apart from that, you can enable encryption at the database layer. And a couple of other things like avoid storing encryption keys in your database. If you really want to encrypt your data, then use third-party key management solutions. So these are the few thoughts I can just talk about. Yeah.
Thanks for that. There's a question here that I can very quickly answer, and it's from Nietzsche from Disney, who asks, for video content providers, do you find there has been a rise in piracy and new types of security breaches during this COVID period? And if yes, does Verimatrix have any new tools to counter this? So absolutely yes, there has been a rise. In fact, just the other day, I was on a call with a pretty popular Southeast Asian OTT provider, and I was saying, listen, I think I found 1 or 2 hacked versions of your app that are available on the web. And he said, oh my God, it's not just 1 or 2. We know it has been hacked. We know it's been hacked a lot, and it's been happening for a while. So it's absolutely happening. We're also seeing, because people are at home and watching more, who wants to pay for it? So if you can avoid paying for it, of course you're going to try and avoid paying for it. And there's enough such people. So yes, there is definitely an increasing trend. And yes, of course, we have tools to counter this. One of the ones that I think Disney should take a look at, and we'd be happy to talk to you about it offline, would be in the watermarking space. So you can actually uniquely identify where content may be leaking out from. down to the individual user and the individual device, whether it's a set-top box or an app, or someone's accessing it over the web. So we'd be very happy to talk to you about that separately. Let me see if there's some other questions. We are not going to tell you which open source tools we use to break open the app. It's not meant to teach you how to do it. It's just meant to show you that this is a risk. And let me see. Oh yes, I think this makes a lot of sense. It is an internal question from Verimatrix, but I thought I would address this to Shubho. And Shubho, Chris asked whether what we're seeing is increasingly folks like telecom operators, for example, are moving beyond telecom, becoming banks in some cases. We're seeing that in India a lot, payment companies, etc. And they're definitely moving into broader areas because the communications channel definitely doesn't generate enough revenue anymore. So as we see this, and as we see other such companies like Grab in Singapore is looking at getting a banking license and doing a whole lot more, Grab Food and whatnot. Are you seeing more and more non-BFSI apps also coming under attack? Is this therefore something that that a lot more people should be focused on as an urgent requirement?
Yes, actually, this is a really nice question. And before all of these, companies shifting towards a BFSI domain, they already had loyalty points and they already had other, credit points which they used to issue. And a year ago, it was not that big of an issue, but now that real money is involved, things have changed a lot. And also with that, there is another thing which comes into the picture. It's called regulations, right? Like, for example, in Singapore, you have MAS. In India, we have certain. So all of these regulators and RBI regulators are also there in India, which regulates companies who gets a banking license to perform a VAPT audit of their application. Before, it was not a mandate to do it if you are using, credits or coins and stuff like that. But now it has become a mandate, and which is a good thing, right? Everyone is shifting to mobile, and everything is shifting to kind of a BFSI segment. It's a good thing that there is a mandate for them to perform an assessment, and which we do, and we have been doing a lot of these assessment, and a lot of issues came up which they did not wanted to be a business related issue previously because it has no real money involved, but now it is. So there is a shift in perspective for both consumer as well as organizations.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty good point at which to wrap this panel discussion up. I would like to thank all of our speakers. Thank you very much, Shubho, Julie, Nilesh, Neal. Thanks, CK, for organizing this. Thanks, everyone, for attending.